Hello, I'm Rex Childhouse, and because things on the internet seem to lose their date references pretty quick, today is Monday, July 24th, 2023. On our big vacation driving from San Diego County to Vancouver, British Columbia for a Disney Wonder Cruise into Alaska and back, we stopped at two zoos and a number of museums, usually on railroad, aviation, or history type subject matter. And on Wednesday, June 7th, 2023, after visiting the California State Railroad Museum, we walked around Old Sacramento and then toured the Sacramento History Museum, which addressed a number of subjects that were pretty interesting. At this point, we were tired, and this would be our last stop, other than for gas and food, on the drive home from Sacramento to San Diego County. Is about an 8 to 9 hour drive for us. And after this, the next day, we made it home. Our vacation ended up being 3 weeks, which was really super, really enjoyable. The Disney cruise was absolutely wonderful, and we had a lot of super museum and zoo visits along the way. So this is the last video on our vacation. Hope you enjoy this one. Thanks.
This is the entrance and building of the Sacramento History Museum. It's a really nice building right next door to the California State Railroad Museum, and the people who run it are really nice. There's a number of panels like this one here for 1857 and 1870, and they continue, that show the growth and development of the city of Sacramento. It's now kind of divided, as I understand it, into two sections: Sacramento, quote unquote, and Old Sacramento. I'm going to work my way through the museum randomly. One of the things that the museum really has a lot of displays on is crops and growing crops, and quite honestly, that's California's second gold, the other gold being the mineral, the material, the item of gold. California is the golden state, mostly because of crops. We are unfortunately water restricted, so that comes up with a number of issues. As you leaf through these panels, you're going to see a whole lot of interesting things, and they showed how the growth of the agricultural business in California expanded, and with the really fertile Central Valley area, which really opened it up, a very productive area. However, it's being abused and used and whatever else, so there's going to be issues in the future about how productive that is. And they talk about how the family had to can, preserve the materials, the vegetables and the fruits and so on through the time. I had to laugh. It was probably 1997, 1998 time frame. I was at VA, I was sick, and Dr. Dan Jones, an intern in the emergency room, says, "I think you have celiac." I said, "What's celiac?" He says, "I think you are allergic to gluten." I said, "What's gluten?" And he said, "Wheat, rye, barley, therefore malt." And I went, oh no, turns out he's right. And I'm in the museum, and they're talking about allergies to gluten, which is one of the most common grains, cheap and whatever else, and how they go in. There was a lot of machinery on display about how to make California an agricultural success, and some of them were really interesting. I wish I had better signage of them. I'm going to show you some of the signage that I've got. Unfortunately, some of it's blurred. Beautiful displays of the equipment, beautifully restored. Gold, 1849, the 49ers, 1848, and the museum has a lot of information on gold and how it was found. One of the things I found interesting was they had a picture of Sutter's Mill, which was where gold was found in 1848, and the workers, not being prudent, if you want to consider it that, actually used the gold to buy supplies and their own materials. One of the things that I've never found in history, mentioned in history, is that Sutter evidently had established a settlement and built a fort, and here's one of the cannons that he brought in to protect his fort. So the gold rush is on. A lot of people didn't know a lot about California, and people wrote these dime books and whatever else. Some really nice displays about how it was mined, and they show what's called a monitor, which is a hydrostatic way of mining the gold. And if you want to see this in operation, watch Clint Eastwood's movie The Pale Rider, where they're taking water and blasting the mountain away, and gold, being as heavy as it is, remains. Or you can run it through sluice boxes and you can separate it from the rocks and the other materials that are going there. It tore up. Ecologists even today have issues with this. Who mined the gold? How was the gold mined? How did you appraise it? How did you separate it? The different ways of mining the gold. And one of the things that was outside the bucket, outside the museum, was this big bucket, which was probably used to pull up the ore and then dump it in sluice boxes and sluice chutes to separate it from the gold. Melting it down so you could carry it as a convenient material, as an ingot, and how you weighed it. And there's a funny story I've got with a scale, and when I worked for a jewelry company, they had to come in and certify our scales, and the guy who certified our scale didn't know math. It was fun. A lot of information on gold mining and a lot of displays on gold mining because of the importance of gold in the state of California. One of the central exhibits inside the Sacramento History Museum was what I will call a round table of these types of panels, and there were probably 12 or 15 panels creating the full circle, and they talked about numerous evolutions, events, processes that Sacramento, now referred to as Old Sacramento, had gone through. People overcoming adversity. And I'm laughing because maybe we should show this picture to a number of people on the Gulf Coast and in several other areas of the country. In the 1860s, I think it is, and if you look at the photo very closely, Sacramento was flooded. The Sacramento River flooded the city, and a number of the residents of Sacramento, which had already been declared the capital of the state of California, said, no way, we aren't going to let this beat us. So instead of moving the town, they raised the town. Look at these photos in detail, and there's water in the streets. They raised the town, and when they raised the town, because some of the initial level floors were still available, they became a basement, and you had a walkway that you could walk over, that these lights, these not lights, these lenses allowed the light to come through. Interesting process. Maybe we should bring that back into FEMA. The Sacramento Bee, the newspaper. Newspapers were big since there were no radios, no televisions, and this is how people got information, and opening the book on California and sending off and having stories written about it and published in other areas of the country brought people. So they talk about Chapter 1, and this is one I disagree with. Chapter 1, the Mexican era of California. How about the Native American era of California being Episode 1, or even the pre-man episode of California, when California was created through tectonic plate shifts, whatever else. We'll get political here. Lots of information about how the stories of California were transmitted, were provided to other areas of the country to bring people to California, what they brought with them, how they brought it, why they came, and the reason they came was a number of things. I'm a romantic. When I see a dress, I look at the dress to see what it is, and this is a beautiful dress, and it talks about it being owned by Mrs. Stanford, and that's the coach, the Stanford's, the governor of the state of California during a lot of its development, rode in. And then next to, associated with this is this Conestoga wagon that was built by Jerry Haynes in memory of his wife. Different ways to come to California, different ways to travel. Lots of information in the Sacramento History Museum about how California, not just Sacramento, evolved. This panel shows several years of progression. I saw this draftsman's kit and said I would actually love to have this in my house because I do a fair amount of drafting. Cut and shave 2 bits, that's a strop. It's not a strap, it's a strop, S-T-R-O-P, I think is how it's properly spelled, and a straight razor. A lot of information, a lot of artifacts that were brought into the state. An 1849 map of the United States, Mexico, the British provinces, etc. Now I had to absolutely laugh because we live in a different era, and you can laugh at the previous eras, but appreciate that that's how they lived. So this guy prints these 10 commandments for the women of the state of California. I highly recommend you pause the video and read some of these, and I didn't give you all of them, but they're hilarious. We spent probably 2.5 hours touring the Sacramento History Museum. Then we stepped outside to what's referred to as Old Sacramento. We didn't get into the lower level of Old Sacramento, if it's still available. I think it actually is. We did search for something that I was after on my Tour Old Sacramento app, and it was the Wells Fargo Museum. So we walked up to a guy and said, we're trying to find the Wells Fargo Museum. Our GPS and our phones tell us we're there. And he kind of laughed and he said, due to a burglary, about 5-7 years ago, the Wells Fargo Museum was closed and never reopened again. And yet on the internet, because everything on the internet is true, on the internet it still showed it as open. We showed up in time to watch a Pony Express event, and these were commemorative riders reenacting the Pony Express, which was a Pony Express ride, which was pretty cool. And there are several. There's a statue for the Pony Express and this plaque. The last portion of our tour, walking around Old Sacramento, there's several locomotives and railroad cars and such parked outside the California State Railroad Museum in Old Sacramento. We just kind of cruised through them, and we walked along the Sacramento River front. I assume this is a tour boat to go up and down the river. It wasn't running when we were there. Railroad bridge, don't see a whole lot of these in Southern California. A railroad bridge over water, and this one pivots to let high ships go down. It doesn't lift or raise. And we drove past the state capitol and down some beautifully tree-lined streets, which I've kind of missed beautifully tree-lined streets. And in Ramona, we have eucalyptus. Let me tell you, they're not a beautiful tree. They're dirty. They aren't indigenous. They should have never been here. Hey, this was a fun second half of the day. At the end of this, we would spend one more night on the road in a motel in Old Sacramento, and then we would be driving home. It was a great vacation, 21 days. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the videos.